30 on a Wednesday edition of WJF Boxing Podcast. Rich Quinones alongside Rob Scott as we welcome in Mark Breland, and does a great job with Deontay Wilder, and of course gold medalist, great pro. Always good to catch up with you. How you been, Mark?
I'm good, and yourself?
We are doing well, and right off the bat, I'm just wondering, walk us through 3 rounds in the other night against Washington. What type of adjustments did you guys make in that 4th and 5th round?
Well, my thing was, when the first 2 rounds, just trying to fill him out, basically, because I figured, I thought he was gonna do more backing up, but he came at Deontay more. So, as he started jabbing him, I told him after the 2nd round he got to pick it up a little bit, and then he caught him in the 4th round, and that was it.
Well, this is Rob Scott. What's going on, Mark? How you doing, man?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm doing good. I know I can ask Deontay this question, but from a trainer standpoint, what grade would you give him for the other night?
Well, see, from coming from 1 to 10, and for me, as a guy who's coming back from a torn bicep and a broken hand, I would give him about a 5 or 6.
Is he fully healed? Because I don't know. Was it more tentative? You mentioned the first 3 rounds because it looked like Washington was able to get the jab going, and I don't know if Deontay was frustrated. I don't know if he was confused. I know he starts off slow a lot of times, but was he tentative to throw that right hand? Is everything fully healed? I would imagine so, or he wouldn't have fought.
Oh no, he throws it, but I think I guess. The first couple of rounds, I guess he tried to, he was trying to fill him out. And, who knows what goes in his mind, what's going off in his head at that time. But I thought he should have did a little bit more than he was doing, but, he's a fighter.
Not to put too much out there, but what are your plans as far as Team Wilder goes, as far as his advancement? Who do you have on your radar as far as his future? Particularly his next fight.
Yeah, I was thinking of the kid's name. Who's the guy? He's the champion. I can't think.
Joshua, the kid Parker. I know you mentioned Parker.
Parker, maybe Parker. Yes. Mm-hmm. Looking more after Parker.
Now he has a WBC has said something about a mandatory. Is he going to be able to sidestep that?
Well, I'm hoping. I heard something about that. I wasn't in the area, but I heard something about it. I heard something about he may have to fight Stefan again. I'm trying to figure out why.
Yeah, it's funny because the WBC. It's funny you mentioned that the WBC. They just came down. I mean, you know this, right? You go back and you look at the fight that was the fight that you just mentioned because of the failed drug test. And that was, before the canceled Povetkin fight. Apparently, the reasons they're doing that, I guess because it's more or less, I hate to say what someone brings up with, not the alphabet belts per se, but it just seems it seems as though they're trying their hardest. They're insisting on making this, and they're also doing the same thing I told Rob in the beginning of the show with Adonis Stevenson. Light heavyweight champ, he's got to make a mandatory defense as well. It doesn't seem as though it's clear on why they're doing it. But, is there, I'm sure you can, as Rob alluded to, maybe kind of sidestep that a little bit because you got to look how everything, we were talking about this in the beginning of the show. You look at how everything might play out because you got Parker fighting, Joshua as well. And then if that's the case, you might not get an opportunity till next year.
Well, I know, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, Mark, but I know within this is the WBC rules, but I know within organizations like the IBF, one of the rules in their rule book is that if he's planning on fighting one of the other champions, then they will give him an exception and allow that fight to take place. Now, they won't give him an exception to fight just anybody when you have a mandatory to take. But as far as...
because he failed the drug test, that leaves you without a mandatory. Think about that, right?
He went back to back with
Yeah,
He's going back to backwards.
well, with Povetkin.
Yeah, with Povetkin,
Yeah.
but regardless, they have determined that Stavern is going to be the mandatory challenger. So what I'm saying is, like with IBF rules, if he decides to go and fight Parker, who is another one of the other champions, they will take that into consideration and they will probably allow that fight to happen. I don't know the WBC rules as much as I know the IBF rules, and I would just hope that, and I hope you guys. For your sake, you probably feel the same way that that you'll be able to move on and fight the WBO champion, and then maybe come back to Stavern, but at the same time, allow that fight with Parker to take place.
I would rather Parker than Stavern anyway. I mean, why go back and do the same thing you did before?
Yeah, but if you think if the WB insists on the Stavern fight, then again, a lot of people think, I mean, from a fan standpoint, from a media fan standpoint, from a boxing standpoint, then you're basically going to get, Wilder and Parker, we're going to get robbed of that fight.
Which one?
If the mandate, if they insist on Deontay taking on Stavern again and seeing that through, then it does appear that then basically rob the fans of Wilder and Parker.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's also a thing of Deontay never failed a test, so it's almost like he's being penalized because of what they've done. He should be able to move on with his career, but at the same time, rules are rules, and they did say what the rule was going to be. So I guess, not advising you, if you will, but at the same time, if you're going to have to fight Stavern, your mind is going to have to be on Stavern.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I want to ask you one more about Deontay, and then I want to get a couple thoughts on your career. It's always good to talk about your career and some of your fights, a lot of your fights in Atlantic City and gold medal and whatnot. When you look at Deontay, and I said this, and I use this out of respect, I think to some extent he's a great fighter, but sometimes I watch him, I look at him as possibly a flawed heavyweight champ, like a flawed fighter at times, and he can get away with it because he's got that jackhammer of that right hand. If there's something that you can fix in his game, in his skill set, what would it be that you would want him to work on a little more?
Fighting tall, and then stick to his jab. Stick to your jab. Don't. And well, one thing I really started on him with was, when you hit a guy and hurt him, don't go crazy. See, when he hits someone, he just starts flailing away with punches, just throwing punches off. I'll say, when you hit somebody, you got time. I said, because a hurt man is dangerous.
Yeah, this is true.
I said, if you swing a while, you might get caught.
Yeah, great point.
If you hit a guy and hurt him, you got a second or two, boom, get right back in.
Mark, one thing that I've always said, and I said that his punching power is unquestionable. We know that he can punch. He hasn't been in the ring. He hasn't been in the ring, or it hasn't been on videotape, if you will, or whether he can necessarily take a punch. From your training him and for your times with him, how do you think his chin is?
He has a pretty good chin. I mean, he's been hitting the gym, and he just goes with it. It's just a matter of, I guess, somebody catching him. Everybody has a point where, sometimes they might get caught. You don't know, and sometimes you might get hit with a shot that don't look like nothing. Those are the ones that hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so, I hope we don't have to.
I'm curious, and again, a couple minutes with Mark Breland, a great gold medalist, great amateur, great pro, trains and works with Deontay Wilder. How about some of your memories of fighting down Atlantic City and winning a couple of those welterweight titles back in the day, going back all the way to the mid '80s, the late '80s, the win against Rafael Pineda. That was at Trump Castle back in the day in Atlantic City. But how about some of those fights down in Atlantic City and some of the memories that you have?
I mean, they were great memories because they were great fights, and it wasn't far. that was our Las Vegas, Atlantic City.
Yeah.
and you had some great, and they had great fights there. I mean, I'm hoping they bring it back.
Well,
They had great fights there. And, when I fought there, I mean, I liked it because, and my friends like, well, they like gambling, so there's no reason to go to Atlantic City.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Even though you were having some early knockouts, so you had an early night. So after the fights, and your friends, after they're done watching you, they can go and play the tables a little bit.
Get in and get out.
well, Mark, you were part of one of the, and in my estimation, the best Olympic class ever. There's always a comparison with Leonard and Spinks, that class, but for my money, you guys had the best class. And I remember when you guys debuted at MSG that night, and I still remember it like it was yesterday, because my brother was a huge Mark Breland fan. But winning that gold medal, I know that had such a feeling that went through you. But you were here in Atlantic City when you won that WBA welterweight championship. Tell us how it felt when they said "and new WBA welterweight champion."
I mean, it was just like, it was a little bit more than the Olympics. Well, the Olympics was big. Don't get me wrong, but then it's like, then you win in the world championship. It's like, wow. I mean, because my thing was, like, people ask me now, Mark, if you can do everything you did, what would you do different? If you did everything over, what would you do different? And I said, well, nothing. I said, because everything I set out to do, I did. And so it's like, but, winning that title, it's like, wow, there's nothing like a world champion.
Now, one question I also want to just ask, in the sense of, and I always ask fighters this question, especially fighters that work with other fighters. What advice do you give fighters, particularly Deontay Wilder, not only from a trainer standpoint and what he should do in the ring, but also from just a friend, man, just advice standpoint of what he should do as far as his career goes? What do you think, what advice have you given him?
Well, my thing was, just, you got to take it one day at a time. Just, man, seeing myself, I'm very relaxed, so it's like, I'm laid back. But it's more, I just take it one day at a time, and, you got to take every fight serious, and, just, it's, you can't take it personal. It's business.
And last one from me, and I'll throw you this. We're creeping in April, which means from a amateur boxing standpoint, right around the corner, we'll get the finals of the New York Daily News Golden Gloves tournament, the 90th edition. And you and I have talked about the Golden Gloves for so many years. I mean, it's amazing when you look at when you fought in the Golden Gloves and you look at all the great boxers over the years, and then we just saw, a great one, her last Golden Gloves last year, and Christina Cruz breaking all the records that you were holding. I mean, what is your fondest memory of the New York Golden Gloves?
I guess there were two. One in the five Golden Gloves, and I guess. No. I know exactly what it is. Number one. I'm sorry, not number two. Number one is fighting at the Garden.
Yeah.
Because fighting at the Garden, I went to see Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier when I was 7 years old, and so then all I wanted to do was fight at the Garden. So when I fought there, and they turned the lights out and everything, I'm like, wow. I'm talking energy. When I was fighting at the Garden, I mean, my brain is going crazy. In the Golden Gloves, they had the lights out.
Yeah.
And they used to do it like the promos, had the lights out and you walk down the aisle. And so when I got in the ring, I'm like, wow. And they called out my record and everything. And I'm like, right then and there, hey, if I never fought in the Garden again, I'm like, hey, I was here. I did it. And that fight. And then, it's like, I'm winning the championship is number two.
Well, what's the feeling of fighting at the Garden as an amateur and then coming back and making that debut? Like I said, that night was a special night. But I know you fought there and you fought there since. What is the difference in fighting there as an amateur and fighting there as a champion, a professional champion?
Professional, right? But fighting there as an amateur, it was like they did it, but but they changed the whole thing up when I turned pro. When I fought there as a professional, they didn't turn the lights out and all that stuff like they did back in the days. So it was like, wow, because when you got that one beam of light coming on you and you walking down the aisle, man, I'm walking down the aisle and I'm like, I made it. That was it. You couldn't tell me nothing.
You started your pro career. You fought Dwight Williams, and then I think your second pro fight, didn't you fight down in Atlantic City?
Yep.
Yeah. Marlon Palmer. Does that ring a bell?
Yep, Palmer. Yep. Because the first guy, what's his name?
In your pro debut.
Yeah.
Dwight Williams.
Williams. I think he had just got out of jail. I'm like, wow, okay. Because I hit him with the kitchen sink, and he didn't move. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you knew it was going to be a 6-rounder for your pro debut. Hey, listen, Mark, it's always great to catch up with you. Keep up the good work with Deontay. Hopefully, maybe I'll catch up with you during the Golden Gloves this year in April, but we appreciate you jumping on board for a couple of moments, pal.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, you got it. Be well.
Have a good one, Mark.
You too.
That's great. The guy just came out of jail. I might have to research that. I might have to double check that. That's a great little tidbit. 6-rounder, pro debut, guys coming at it a clink.
Hey, you got to be prepared for the inside fighters and the outside fighters, literally.
All right, 7:46. We'll come back. We'll wrap things up on a Wednesday. We'll give our predictions on Thurman and Garcia as well.